Hi everybody, I'm Alex and I'm here with my friend David Gonzalez, who is my first featured student I'm doing for this series. And you came to mind naturally because I was over here and we were talking about how you really got into the yoga practice and how it helped with PTSD for you. And so you naturally were someone I wanted to talk to more and find out more about your story. And, we're coming on the 20th anniversary for 9/11 right now. And I know that's part of your story and that we were both actually in New York that day. I was in a yoga class. So we'll be getting into that part of his story and how he found yoga and jail and other things that we'll discuss. Thank you for being here.
Hello, everybody.
So let's start with 1982. Is that the year you were born?
Yep, December 29th, 1982.
He's a baby child. Okay.
Not that
You
much of a
look
baby.
so good. Oh my gosh, to be that. Okay. So 1982. And when did you start yoga?
I started yoga in January of 2019.
Okay. Oh, wow. So it's just been almost
About 2.5 years.
Okay, 2.5 years. And when did you start taking my class?
In January of 2019.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't mess it up for you.
You didn't, actually.
Okay, that's always my
I'm
goal.
hooked.
Always my goal.
She got me hooked.
Okay. All right. So you came in and when we talked the other day, we were talking about how it's had an effect. What kind of effect has the practice had on?
What kind of effect has the practice had on my PTSD or my life in general?
First, let's go life in general.
Okay. Well, when I went into yoga kicking and screaming. I was like, I guess you can say I was kind of a meathead. I was just kind of used to like running on the treadmill and lifting mundane weights. And that was my idea of exercise. Even though I've played sports, throughout my entire life, that was sort of like my outlet for exercise.
Mm-hmm.
However, it was recommended by my therapist that I try yoga. It was actually one of the first things that they recommended, and it was the last thing that I tried.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, like I said, I went in like kicking and screaming. And so
do you know why you were kicking and screaming?
I think that this probably ties into my PTSD, but I wasn't really open to trying new things in general. Mm-hmm. I was because of my PTSD, I sometimes have symptoms of like obsessive compulsive disorder. Mm-hmm. Whatever keeps me safe, or whatever works, so to speak.
Okay.
So anything that sort of interrupts that can come through as threatening sometimes. And, not to say that I really felt threatened by yoga. I just didn't, I was really skeptical, and I wasn't fully aware of the impact that yoga can have on somebody.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think that some would say contempt prior to investigation, or like or resistance is a better way to say it, it's an interesting thing when we like push through it, right? When we push through the resistance.
I also was someone that was totally against stretching. Stretching didn't feel good to me at all. So like even when I would go and I would lift and stuff, it'd be like very minimal stretching. And so I've been able to sort of reprogram that in my head, where stretching now feels like a massage. But I know I'm not alone in that experience too. I know there's like other people that like loathe stretching,
right.
Just
for sure.
For whatever reason, like stretching for me when I first started or before I did yoga was like, I just hated it. It hurt.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
there's that. And
yeah.
There's that. And how often do you do yoga now?
I try to do it every day.
He really does.
Yeah.
That's a lot of yoga. Yeah. Okay. So going back to, because we were both in New York 20 years ago, and I was in a yoga class myself when it happened.
Wow.
I was taking an Ashtanga-led primary class. I think it's one of those things we all remember where we were.
Yeah, we do.
And
That's right.
because no one stops a class. No one ever comes in and says you have to stop. So that day and the days after and how I handled it have stayed with me, because the way I handled it was staring at the TV screen, watching the news and drinking, like just on repeat. Anyway, with you and your story, where were you when it happened?
Well, when the first plane hit, I was actually getting ready for my first period class. It was just after 9 o'clock. And I was a first year freshman at New York City. So I had left my humble beginnings, in my early childhood. I left Maryland to pursue this life in New York City, where I had dreams of working in the World Trade Center. So
what part of town were you in?
I was in the financial district. I was directly across from the World Trade Center with no buildings between us. So
Okay.
which was the dorms of Pace University.
Okay.
Pace University also had classes on the 55th floor of the South Tower as well. So so a lot of the students were actually in their class. So we lost a lot of students and faculty members actually on that day.
So you're getting ready.
Sorry.
So it's good.
Yeah, so I was in the shower, and this one of the other students named Ty, who I've been unsuccessful in finding after that day, and he became, since we were so young at 18 years old, and and you're just starting out in college, it sort of feels like summer camp, because you're like a child.
Yeah.
So you bond with people right away, and they like sort of become like your best friends in a very short amount of time. So that's what happened. So Ty opens up the door and he goes, "Someone just bombed the World Trade Center." So I catapult out of the shower, I put on shorts, and I run to the lobby of the school, and we're all sort of like, the lobby of our dorms, and we're all sort of like looking up at the building, at the smoke, sort of whatever's going on. And then we go outside to take a closer look, and that's when and this all happened within the course of like minutes. And by the time I reached outside, we saw the second plane coming, and at first it was, oh, there's a plane, and then it was, wait, it's getting closer, and then it was, when I remember it, the impact when it hit the building seems like slow motion to me, and I'll never forget the heat that I felt coming from the flame, and just how bright it was. That's something that I'll never forget, is how bright the explosion was, because I remember just being like, it almost felt like I was in the middle of a firework or something.
So you're on the ground, obviously, and looking up at this, and it's just literally right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened? What did you do?
So we ran into our dorms. Everybody was sort of scattered. When the first plane hit, everybody was confused. When the second plane hit, it created confusion, but people kind of got it at that point. They realized it wasn't just an accident. So there was sort of what I like to consider sort of minor pandemonium in terms of like the entire experience, because there was like sort of stages of chaos, where I think that the first glimpse of chaos that I got from that day was when the second plane hit, and then like the second one was when the first building fell, and then the third one was when the second building fell. So it was like stages of chaotic moments throughout that. So I was on the ground floor when the second plane hit. We ran inside. Do you want me to just kind of briefly sort of tell what happened? So the students were really confused, and we were sort of just looking for our faculty members and our resident advisors at the time to sort of guide us and tell us what to do, because we didn't really know what to do or where to go. And the longer you waited, the more martial law came in. So it was almost like when it was easier to evacuate the area during the first initial moments than it was even like after things were falling in chaos, because they closed the bridges, and they weren't allowing people going in.
Of course.
They were so you sort of felt stuck. So So I was, me and a bunch of other students were just going in and out of the dorms, in and out of the dorms, wondering where to go. And I was kind of rendered homeless, after that because you know, so I'm sort of telling this story in pieces, which I just, yeah. So
It's okay.
for the sake of,
It's okay. Deep breath.
So when the first building fell, so we stayed in this state of confusion for a really long time. We were being told, as students, we're kind of looking for guidance, and we were being told all these different things. Leave, stay in here, you're safe here, you're not safe here, you're safer out there. And then, it wasn't until the first building fell that pandemonium really started kicking in. And some people were in dissociative states, they couldn't move. And some people were calm. Some people were completely in fight or flight, just completely panicked, which mostly people were panicked. But for me, I kind of got into this calm kind of state, and where I was able to, even though there were moments of chaos, I was still able to sort of gather I was like in this fight or flight state where I'm like rushing and panicking, and then I would stop myself and be like, no, where are you going? But then I started realizing that there's nowhere for me to really go, So when I would realize this, the only place for me to go was inside the dorms, right? So anyway, I paired up with a bunch of other students, and we kind of built this like close knit of people that we would separate and then regroup, and then separate and regroup again. But when the first building fell, we went inside the dorms, and one of the faculty members went on a mega mic and said that there was a gas leak underneath the building. So we all left the building naturally, because then the second building fell. And so
you were running outside?
Well, while I was sort of outside, sort of wondering what to do, and and this is after the first building had already fallen. So when the second building fell, it was like, when the first building fell, there was like, after the structure had sort of fallen. It wasn't really settled, but it had fallen. There was like moments of like people sort of still, like not knowing what, in a paralytic kind of state. Mm-hmm. And then when the second building fell, it was just like carnage and chaos. And so when the second building fell, I remember that in the same way I remember the second plane hitting the South Tower. I remember it in slow motion. And I got projectiled into the side of a building where I split my forehead, so that's why I have my scar.
As the second building fell,
So when the second building fell, I just ran in the other direction, and I got projectiled into a building. And luckily I wasn't that far away from my dorms. So
and you said something.
Yeah, so I got projectile into the side of a building, splitting my forehead, breaking my nose, several different places. I hit my chin, which caused my bottom teeth to rise up and make my front teeth push out. So if you see, like, my teeth kind of have like a, because they hit here and it rose up.
I see on the bottom teeth.
And it rose up.
Okay.
And then my nose is broken, and then my forehead was split. So I was like, so immediately I was just.
And it hurt your voice, right?
So yeah, so that came in a little, like that was sort of coming in as the inhalation was being, like I was breathing in. So but when my injury happened, I almost kind of feel like it might have saved me in a way, because I sort of like I stopped and I was in this state of dissociative state, where I kind of like huddled in the corner that I was projectiled in. And I just sat there until while everything was going on. It felt like I was in the middle of a tornado. So it was just all you heard was like crashing and screaming and screeching, and every kind of like chaotic noise you could ever hear, I heard. And, in some ways, like I wish I would have like blanked out, but a lot of these memories I have they're instilled, like you relive them. And I have later learned that it's part of PTSD. Is reliving the experience over and over again,
right.
So I ended up at one point. Actually, what ended up happening was realized that I was in this dissociative state, and I realized what had sort of happened, and I sort of kind of like I don't want to say give up, but I sort of surrendered to it, and and I was sort of like, what do I do now? And I was moving very slowly. Like the injury kind of enabled me to like not be as chaotic, because and so. But I remember I didn't start moving until I actually looked up and I saw a man, and he was looking around on the ground for something, and it looked like when like someone drops a contact or something and they're looking around on the ground, they're trying to look for their contact, and I was wondering like what this man is looking for, and I'm looking at him go around in circles, and he's looking around, and he picks up his arm, his actual arm, and that's when I realized, like.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like the, I mean, there was moments of like realization of how severe it really actually was. But I remember that moment is something that kind of snapped me back into it,
Like into the present?
snapped me back into the present and got me like, okay, get up and move. So I gathered myself and I went back into the dorms, and I sat in I went into the dorms of Pace University, Maria's Tower. It's called Maria's Tower. And I just crawled inside the door and I sat there. And then I sat there until one of my friends, Corinne, which was a freshman at Pace University, was like, Dave. And they used to call me Overexcited Dave, because you know how I get very overexcited. So they were like, Dave. So whenever I heard my name, I always like kind of responded to it, because it was like friends, So, if it wasn't for like, my fellow students, I don't know where I would be, because we kept each other safe and sane. So we went back into my dorms. We went against the direction of the martial law. We were being told with like rifles and guns to leave the dorms, because our school also was next door to NYU Downtown Hospital. So our dorms, because we had a nurse's office there, we had a cafeteria, 2 cafeterias and beds. So they used Pace University dorms as a triage unit and a morgue. So very quickly we were like not allowed in for various different reasons. So but I had to like figure out where to go for safety, me and my friends. And so what we did was we went to a local store, which was right next to our school. I'm trying to remember the name of the store, which I can't remember. And we got a bunch of beer, and we just snuck into the back door and went up into our dorm, and we just like basically sat there until we would hear martial law, like, is anybody in there? Boom, 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 and knock in, and we were being threatened as well. We were like, if you're not leaving downtown, the immediate areas, then you will be shot, because you will be because we were being told that if you don't evacuate, you will be classified as one of the terrorists.
Oh, wow. Oh.
Yeah. So it was terrible, and that's actually a detail that I for some reason always forget, but that's what we were being told. But we didn't care. For some reason, we were like, it's not that we didn't care. We were just kind of just like, we knew we didn't have anywhere to go, and we also knew that nobody knew what to do. Nobody was prepared for that, and it was very apparent that nobody was prepared. Not even the military, and like none of the faculty, and we were children. Like that's how I felt. Like I felt like, I mean, like when you're 18, and you're going to college, you feel like an adult. But when things happen like this, you kind of like realize like your adulthood.
You're 19.
18.
18. Wow.
Yeah.
I was trying to do the math with you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so then we got escorted around 12:30, 1 o'clock, martial law, across the Brooklyn.
Quick question.
Huh?
How far was that from your original place you were getting ready?
So I went back into after my accident, and after all the after the second building had fallen. So it's kind of like where the Brooklyn Bridge was, and where my school is, and where the World Trade Center was, like a very small triangle, all within like 1 block radius of each other. So, and because my school was in front of City Hall, City Hall is located in downtown, there was no building in between us. It was just a park. So it was just the dorms of Pace University and the towers.
Yeah.
So we were, so after the second plane had hit, we would just look up to the people that were committing suicide, and we would see them fall, and you would hear them drop, and we would see them on the ground, and then you would see the fire trucks running over the bodies.
Oh my
And these
God.
are
Oh
and these
my
are details
God.
that people don't know,
my
people
God.
haven't heard, because they had to get around it, and you would see people also in panic in there, because the plane hit at 83rd floor, so there was a significant amount of floors above it, and then there was some people below it, but the flames were going up, right? And so you would see some people above where the planes hit jumping down, and they were typically in chaotic states, and you would just go, you see them run out. They'd open and they would just dive. But then you would see people underneath realize that they couldn't go anywhere for whatever reason, and they would calmly exit the window, and they would hold hands, and they would turn, and they would just fall. And we were children. I was a child. Even though I was 18, for all intents and purposes, I felt like a child. And I'm looking at these. I'm looking up at the place I came to school to work in. We had our classes on the 55th floor of the World Trade Center. But at the same time, I'm looking at all the people that work there, my idols, people that are, people that I look up to, committing suicide, killing themselves. It's like something I would never have imagined anybody would ever see, and some of them in calm states, some of them in chaotic states. But it's something that it is instilled in me, because it was something so incredibly just evil, terrible, dark. There was no way to explain it. That experience, I like to tell people, like anybody that's ever gone through any kind of trauma, is people that haven't been through a significant amount of trauma. You're always in this state. You're always in this mindset that it won't happen to me. It won't. It won't happen to me. It happened to somebody else. Oh, I'm so lucky it didn't happen. People that are open-minded say things like I'm so fortunate that it didn't happen to me. But people that have been through trauma know that it can get there. So it's so because you've gone there, it can go there, and so that's where one of the symptoms of PTSD comes in, or one of the many symptoms of PTSD comes in, is feeling like hypervigilance is like preparing yourself for something to happen that won't happen.
Oh.
But feeling like it will, because it did.
Yes.
So.
And you would call that hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance. I have major hypervigilance. Yeah. I have a lot of the symptoms of PTSD. I almost checked them all off. I was evaluated by a psychiatrist that I can get into later, but it was actually, my symptoms ended up getting so bad to my adulthood that I wasn't addressing that, and we can get into the story of why it was appointed, but I had a court appointed at one point psychiatrist, and I'm glad it was court appointed. There was an incident that happened where I was, I had to face some legal ramifications because of I was in fight or flight, and I was so. Do you want to just get into that?
It's up
maybe?
to you if you want to share it.
So what had happened was, in my late 20s, so I was, 2 years after the events happened, I ended up moving out of New York. I couldn't handle it anymore. And at the time, I didn't realize that I really couldn't handle it. I just knew that I wanted something different. I didn't realize that I was like in this PTSD sort of state with all of these overwhelming symptoms of PTSD sort of taking over. I felt like I was like a refugee. When I came to California, I came here with one bag, and I told people that I was only taking a semester off. I had this sort of split personality sort of thing where I was trying to operate in David's state before 9/11 and sort of keep up that business, endeavors I had, and my goals and aspirations, but at the same time, fully aware that I was dysfunctional as an adult. So when I moved to LA, I very quickly ended up getting a job working in entertainment, and I just drowned myself in work, which is also another symptom where people try to distract themselves with something, and they engulf themselves in work or whatever to sort of distract from the symptoms, but eventually they catch up to you. So that's what happens. So in my early 30s, I was about 30 exactly, actually, I was self-medicating. I had insomnia. I was diagnosed with like so many different mental illnesses that later on, that when I was diagnosed with them, I'd never mentioned my 9/11 because I was trying to forget it, my experience in 9/11. So I was being diagnosed with like mania, insomnia, bipolar disorder, and then when I was finally able, so when I was self-medicating, a cop tried to pull me over, and I was 2 blocks away from my destination. So what happened was I viewed that experience like, oh no, like, my body immediately went into fight or flight. And I always knew that I needed to get from point A to point B. So since I was a couple blocks from my destination, and the destination being someone I knew, I knew that if I got there and I was with a friend, an ally, they would help me through this incident, And a lot of incidents I kind of I would use like that. I was like, how do I get out of this? If this is an incident that I feel like I can't control, what is the easiest way out?
Yeah.
Not the right way out. What's the best way out?
Effective.
For survival purposes.
Yeah.
So long story short is I'm calmly driving to my destination, fully knowing that I'm self-medicated. I might get a DUI or whatever, and I go to my destination. The cop thinks that I have a stolen vehicle. Doesn't know why I'm evading. Is really confused. Doesn't like. I put together enough for him not to even. I don't end up getting a DUI, but he ends up charging me with an evading charge. So I end up getting like evading the police. So I ended up going to Men's Central Jail downtown. And I got an attorney. An attorney was going to bail me out immediately so I could fight the case on the other side. But at the time that I was in jail in 2019, LA was trying to properly rehabilitate the inmates. So they said that there was this there was a program called AB 1810, which meant that if you have a mental illness a drug addiction. That's right. A drug addiction or a mental illness that pertains to your crime, that you get released up to a rehabilitation center, like a conditional release.
Yeah.
And then upon the completion of the rehabilitation, your case gets dismissed.
Right.
Now, because I, wasn't caught with any kind of drugs or paraphernalia on me, they had to diagnose me in jail. So I ended up spending 6.5 months in Men's Central Jail until I was diagnosed with the appropriate mental illness that can link my mental illness or my PTSD, which was I was diagnosed, to my crime, and they were able to in a very fluid fashion link it. But because
Why
I was
6 months?
6 months because the psychiatrist was in the mental. So the LA jail system is separated in 2 sections. There's Twin Towers. Ironically enough,
Right.
it's actually called Twin Towers. And when I was in jail, I was like, is there Satan like trying to? Because the fact that it was called Twin Towers too was so like traumatic in and of itself that I was like stuck in the towers, here was. But I actually wasn't placed in the towers. The towers were they used for more like people that need that have like mental health and they need medications. So they have like mental health staff and psychiatrists and to evaluate the inmates that need that, as opposed to other inmates that don't really need that, so to speak. And not to say like whether or not I needed it or not, at the time when I was evaluated and processing, they didn't put me in the Twin Towers where the medical physicians were.
Okay.
So the psychiatrist had to get a like a permission, like a clearance form in order to go into Men's Central Jail, since they're two different facilities. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And every time the psychiatrist would get a clearance, it took 3 weeks. And so every time I would go to court, my court date was like 3 weeks. So when I went to court initially, you know, I hadn't been evaluated, and that's when they, you know, I had my attorney. They had evaluated that there was other elements that were that contributed to my crime that were other than evading the police, because I wasn't trying to get away from the police. I was just trying to get to my destination, so to speak. So they were sort of trying to link up everything and where my mentality was at and what was happening. And that's when I ended up telling my attorney about 9/11. And then they sort of opened up this door from my ability to speak about my experience and also get properly diagnosed. I was really ashamed of my story in 9/11. I had survivor's guilt. I also had, I wasn't at a place in my life, I hadn't found yoga. I wasn't at a place in my life to talk about it. You know, I would either hysterically cry, or I would stutter, or I wasn't able to articulate correctly. I mean, even now I'm still struggle with articulating it. My story gets jumbled. I have to go back.
Deep breaths.
Which is what I'm experiencing now, is like this urgency, this fight or flight.
Yeah.
Right now,
feel
I actually have numbness in my nose and in my mouth.
Before I got here, or
When I was thinking about like what I was going to say,
as
I started
you thought
getting
about talking to me.
I started
Wow.
getting, so then I told myself, you don't need to prepare.
No.
Don't prepare. And so when I, you know,
And if you decide you don't want me to show this to anybody,
I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
We'll talk before I do.
So then going back to the story. So it took 6 months because they would waive every time so when the psychiatrist would come, we would be, because I was in Men's Central Jail and it's so chaotic. I was in the LGBT ward, which was also in like the ward with like all the other people with like the gangs and so there was a lot of violence there, and every time there was any like a riot or anything, it was they would put everybody in lockdown, and lockdowns happened all the time. So every time the psychiatrist would come and see me, we were in a lockdown. It was like almost like you were more in a lockdown than not. So every time there was a lockdown, she'd have to go back and get another clearance.
And that takes 3 weeks.
3 weeks. So then I would go back to court, and I'd have to waive time again, and then wait.
And you're sleeping there and eating, obviously.
Eating there. But it was kind of good because the psychiatrist was able to get a few clearances to be able to speak to me in length about what happened, about my upbringings. Like I spoke to the psychiatrist in Men's Central Jail in depth about my life in general. Mm-hmm. You know, so by the time we got to 9/11, she had already known like the backstory of whatever I'd gone through, and then when I got to that, she was able to like sort of evaluate how my change in behaviors happened and what sort of like led up. So long story short is it was almost like a grace of God that I was there for 6.5 months. It removed me from my environment. It allowed me to sort of like let go of control, you know, of you know, like my daily activities, sit with my thoughts, which was, you would think that it was like, it'd be terrible that you're in jail. And initially it was. Initially I didn't want to be there. But once I allowed myself to sort of sit with it, I found a lot of freedom in there, you know, because I realized that it was a time for me to reflect on my actions. Never in a million years would I think would be in jail, you know?
Right.
And here I was. So I was able to like sit and wonder what it was that got me there. And I think the length of time was important because I really wanted to get to the root of the problem, so I didn't have to either go back to jail, but also I realized that like a lot of people around me had trauma. So I found a lot of like camaraderie in a lot of the inmates. But then at the same time, I realized that I'd been living in this state for a really long time. And society wasn't helping. You know, the pressures of society weren't helping it at all. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have those pressures in jail. So I don't know. It was like when I talk about jail to people, they're always like, you talk like a jail, like you were on vacation.
Wow.
And in a lot of ways, it was a vacation for me.
Wow, of the challenges of just living
in living
our
in
world,
PTSD.
in PTSD. What, since all of this, how long ago was jail?
Jail was, I got arrested in May of 2018.
And then, okay.
So I got
and then-
released in November 14th, right before Thanksgiving.
What?
And then,
Months later?
and then 2 months later, I joined Equinox.
2 months. So, 2 months
Where I met
before you
you.
walked into my class, you were in jail.
Yeah. No. Yes.
3 months.
Yeah.
I did
2
not
months,
know
November.
that.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. It's so interesting how we don't know. One of my closest friends, Cleo, who's a gifted teacher, beautiful teacher, says to me, we don't know what happened in Act 1 and Act 2, depending on age of someone's life. And so how?
Well. So
Yeah.
one more thing is that me and my family and friends had advocated for me to go to the appropriate rehabilitation center. So I went to one that was not only LGBT, because I felt like a lot of the issues that I had, even aside from 9/11, were stemming from like internalized homophobia and stuff. So there was like other, elements that I could address. So I went to this LGBT facility, but I'm actually really fortunate I went to that LGBT facility, because this one particular one was incredibly open-minded. And one of the things that they was mandatory, which a lot of other rehabilitation centers, I learned later on, don't do, was mandatory yoga.
Oh,
Yeah, for the clients.
so you did it at the facility too.
So we ended up doing but it was more like restorative. It wasn't
right.
like flowy. But so I sort of got a glimpse of it, and I didn't. And at first I wouldn't go. So they were like. So at one point I was almost like almost like not about to get kicked out, but almost like about to get like I don't know, like a slap in the wrist or something. Because I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to do yoga. Like I was like still against it. Still my old ways. But going there, I finally I was able to surrender and and that's where it sort of started. The little something sparked in my mind.
And knowing you, I also know that you do service work.
Yes.
How long have you been doing that?
That's actually a huge proponent in yoga.
Yeah.
I feel like yoga was the vehicle that brought me to sanity. But when I reached sanity, I realized that all of the hard work that I had gotten to actually get there, I didn't want to be selfish and just keep for myself. There was this sort of innate awareness, and I don't know if everybody maybe is able to have this experience, but I had this experience where I had this innate awareness, especially coming from jail, and seeing people that were being thrown in jail for innocent crime, not even crimes, just being homeless. There was something in me that I knew I had to do to give back. I didn't want to just take all the work that I had done and take this gift, this miracle that God had given me of sanity, this ability to live my life free in a state of freedom, or sort of like a reset, even before 9/11 didn't happen. I knew I needed to do something to give back. So I feel that with my PTSD, yoga and service have been just working hand in hand together.
So can we talk I would love for you to share what the service is.
So I volunteer at an organization called Feed My Poor, which is through Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills. We have partnered with Martha's Kitchen, which is one of the largest food banks in LA. At the same time, even though Church of the Good Shepherd is a Catholic church, we believe, along with a lot of other denominations and religious organizations, believe in this belief called ecumenicism. Is
ECU?
ECCUMENICAL, ecumenical.
Okay.
And an ecumenical church or synagogue or mosque has the belief that nobody's wrong and you're not right. You just have a focus, you know? So our church believes that we just have this focus of Catholicism. So we've built a lot of relationships with synagogues and mosques. So there's members within those churches and mosques and synagogues that come and help us make sandwiches, and we deliver those to we deliver, our load to the impoverished, transient, homeless community in greater Los Angeles area.
Why do you quote homeless?
I quote homeless because it's a term that I've grown to learn doesn't apply to everybody. So some people, like veterans, that in the United States we have along with a lot of problems, there are a lot of veterans that are homeless, and they're homeless by choice. One of them, this guy named Tim, who I feed on a weekly basis. He is not able to live in an apartment because he wakes up in the middle of the night and starts throwing things and yelling, and so he'll eventually get kicked out. So he's sort of like has exhaust, and the Veterans Association can only help, I guess, a certain amount of people, which is awful. So we have a problem. It's an epidemic in the United States. We have, in every country really, is this people living in state of these on the street, and some of them consider it their home. So I've insulted some people with calling them saying homeless, or referring to them as homeless for whatever reason. I sort of tend to stray away from that word.
And is there another word you use?
I sort of just use the impoverished community,
Okay.
Anyone that's hungry, impoverished community, transient community.
Okay. Wow. Well, I think that your story is so inspiring, and I now can recognize, I knew a lot of it, but not all of it. I think it takes a lot of courage to even talk about it.
Thank you. It's
like you said, you hadn't told them. They were diagnosing you with all of these other things. You hadn't even been able to speak about it. And that's one of the takeaway messages I would want to say for anyone listening, that you find someone you can speak with. Yoga may not be right yet. At some point, possibly yoga can be supportive, because it gets us in our bodies as well when we're ready. Sidebar, and then I will get back. I want you to talk, but always check with. I think people should check with a professional when there's severe PTSD before even doing yoga, because it is in our body, and we don't want to reactivate the stress.
Oh yeah, and at the same time, I am fully for medications, because I'm aware that some people have such overwhelming, invasive, mental issues that require medications. But because I wasn't being properly diagnosed, I was being prescribed all of these like antipsychotics and mood stabilizers that were only exacerbating my symptoms. Yeah, making it even worse. And also, when you speak to someone with PTSD, going back to what you were saying about speaking to somebody, about your experience.
A professional.
It's very difficult for people that have PTSD to speak about their experience, because some of the symptoms of PTSD are shame, and shame because of lack of control, and judgment, because of the lack of control. So, and that's some of the things that had held me back from getting the help that I needed, was judgment. And people did judge me for it. There's a lot of people that accused me of lying as well.
About what?
9/11. Because I would hear, in my 20s, it's sort of a topic of conversation when someone says 9/11. People was, oh, where were you? I was in New York. I was in there. And then when I say, oh yeah, there I was, right underneath the building going into the South Tower for my first period class, it just, I don't know, people have, or at least I felt like that. So for whatever, it's being able to feel safe and get your story out was very imperative for my healing.
Yeah.
And it takes someone that is going to be able to listen and not judge you. And, and you've been that for me.
Thank you. Thank you. And not to have share shame.
Not to have share shame. Yeah,
It's like, listen, it's a privilege for me to get to hear your story and anyone who's watching this. And that's really the way I see it. When we are bearing witness to someone's vulnerability and truth, it's a privilege.
I agree.
To hold that space, and like you do with the impoverished and helping. So that's how I see it. And I'm sorry that happened with other. We can't control them, though. We don't know why or what their act 1 or 2 is. Why people are the way they are.
But some of the some of the symptoms that somebody may encounter of PTSD, just speaking for me, would be things like hypervigilance being one of them, dissociation being a huge one. There was times where even when I was in the seat, where I would see the sun go down, and I would see the sun come up, and I'd see the sun go down again, and I'm in the same seat, without food, without water, getting up periodically to pee, come back and to go to the bathroom, come back into the same spot. Dissociation knows no bounds of time.
Wow.
You could be in it for as little or as long, but there's that. There's insomnia.
You said the numbness.
The numbness. I wake up every single morning in fight or flight.
And you said it hurt your vocal cords.
Well, so I speak with a permanently raspy voice. So I have what they consider internal, external, and psychological scars from the event. So I have the external scars from it. I have the internal as well. I'm being currently treated or being monitored by the World Trade Center Health Program. And they divided it into the victims into three different zones. Zone 1 being the closest, which are the people in the building or directly underneath. Zone 2, people being within the 3 block radius, and then Zone 3 being 3 or more. And I was in Zone 1. So I didn't actually have a voice for about a year. So I spoke like this. So,
Oh my God.
and then when I was able to get a voice again, it was completely unnatural to my normal voice. I didn't speak like this before 9/11. I didn't sound anything like this.
Wow.
So my vocal cords are burned. There's a marble-sized hole in the middle of my vocal cords. So I have to speak louder. So I had to learn how to project more in order to get a sound out.
Oh.
Yeah, and so I had to sort of learn how to speak with vocal cords that never come together again. And so it's very easy for me to lose my voice, and I spoke with no voice for a long time, and and like messed up teeth and nose and carnage. But
let me circle back to yoga with everything of you. When you practice, or when you started practicing, what was it that helped you? Do you know? Can you articulate that?
yes. So I went in. So when I went in, I had, like I said, I had exhausted all of my avenues for help, and it was up to me to find something, that would. And I was find something appropriate, and I was exhausted with medications. I was just exhausted. I felt like, for me, and I know that this is different from everybody. So, like I said, I know that there are some people that benefit off medication, so I don't want to take away from that. But I wanted to sort of try an alternative to it. So a normal day for me is I wake up in fight or flight every day. There's like one day right now at the top of my head that I can remember, and that was on Emily's yoga retreat, that I didn't wake up in fight or flight. But so I have to do this regulation every single morning. So every morning I wake up sort of in this 9/11 state, because it happened. That was my morning that day. So I know that it can happen again. So when I found yoga, something really miraculous happened, where the yoga practice has healed me in a way. You're never, so my experience has been so far is like you're not like fully healed, but if you can find sometimes it has like a lingering effect, and then it wears off, and then your PTSD symptoms come up again, and you do it again. So for yoga, that's why I practice on a daily basis. But yoga, me practicing one day sort of lingers into like the next day, and then the next day after that, till after I practice again. But yoga has been all encompassing, whereas like a medication can be like, like just help you with one of the symptoms.
Okay.
You know?
Right. That makes
So
sense.
it makes sense because yoga, not only with the breath work, and it regulates you. It regulates you in more ways than one, like all the systems of the body, you know, the central nervous system, your,
Circulatory
circulatory
your
system,
somatic, just how you
somatic
feel
system,
the body being present.
and because of the all-encompassing benefits of yoga, you're able to sort of be complete. Somebody with PTSD is able to feel whole again because of that, and that's what my experience has been.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. And do you have any favorite poses?
Handstand for sure. I still am not able.
Restorative.
I'm still not able to like really hold the handstand, but you know, yoga is great because yoga, you grow in your yoga practice endlessly, eternally. You can eternally grow, so it gives you something to have control over, which is what people that have gone through traumatic incidences, whatever, don't have any control over that. And this is something that you have control over, but at the same time, you have to face all of the elements of PTSD, like your fight or flight. You go into
where
fight.
it is in your body too.
I also have grown to know that any issues that you're dealing with mentally, there's physical manifestations of that.
Yeah.
So I've been able to alleviate whatever I'm feeling emotionally because of my PTSD through yoga, you know, and it's been profound, you know, and that's just been my experience. And you know, I still pray, I still meditate, you know, but there hasn't been anything quite like yoga, you know, to make me feel so it makes me feel like I can overcome any of these obstacles. Gives me a lot of power and strength.
I'm so excited. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to close our... I need a hug.
Love you.
Love you. Oh my gosh. Thank you for this.
Thank you for letting me share my story. Wow. And I'm open to, you know, anybody that would like to speak to me, you know, about whatever they're going through in their life. Yeah, and you know, I can just shed some light as to like what I've done to overcome some of the obstacles in my life, and hopefully shed some light into maybe how you can as well.
Thank you, David. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Namaste.
Namaste.